On today's show, we break down the top 4 prospect performances of the last week, highlighted by Hutson's Calder Trophy surge, as well as Zayne Parekh's ridiculous scoring in the OHL.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyde, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down an article that I wrote over at Elite Prospects that will, of course, be linked in the description down below, as always, breaking down the top prospect performances of last week. And on today's show, we have some big names. We have some big NHL, not just prospects, but stars already as well, with Hutson and his Calder surge in the first segment. In the second segment, we'll be focusing in on Zayne Parekh of the Saginaw Spirit in the OHL, drafted, of course, by the Calgary Flames in the first round in the top 10 of last year's NHL draft. And then in the final segment, we'll be breaking down one of the biggest risers in the 2025 NHL draft, Benjamin Kindel of the Calgary Hitmen, who is tied for 5th in league scoring, which has been incredible to watch this season, as well as Melvin Fernström, recently acquired by the Pittsburgh Penguins in that Marcus Pettersson trade with the Vancouver Canucks. And ever since that deal, Fernström has been a point-per-game scorer in the SHL as a D+1 player. It's been very impressive to watch here. He's been playing with a real chip on his shoulder and finding some real depth scoring in a bottom 6 capacity. So without further ado, settle yourselves in, make yourselves comfortable whenever or wherever you might be listening to this show. So for the Habs fans watching, let's just dive straight into Hutson's game, because he has been excellent as of late. After perhaps a slightly middling 15 or 20 game stretch there in the middle of the season, after his tremendous scoring rate earlier on in the campaign, Hutson has been finding his way back onto the score sheet night in, night out for the Habs, and has been an integral piece of the recent 5-game win streak. He has 7 points in the last 5 games, 9 points in the last 10, and he's up to 4 goals and 48 points in 61 NHL games, which is best for all rookies across the league. There are so many arguments in favor of this player as a Calder candidate, as I laid out in the article as well. Not just the point production and the dynamism from the blue line, the head and shoulder fakes that are still fooling NHL defenders on a pretty regular basis, but the fact that he's been munching massive minutes and treading water defensively for a player who is, of course, undersized at 5'10", 165 pounds. He doesn't have all that much weight behind him, but he keeps his feet moving. He has a nonstop motor and a really active stick. He's been finding ways of killing rushes and stuff. He's actually been the Montreal Canadiens' best rush killer, like pure like turnover machine of causing turnovers while defending the rush. But he's also the player that gets beat the most often. So he takes risks while defending the rush, and he's been effective in creating those turnovers. And when he creates that turnover, he's going straight back the other way in a counterattack. It's one of the reasons he's been so effective offensively at even strength this season, has been he's been creating his own turnovers and converting those into odd man rushes. Often he's getting like perhaps the secondary assist on those options because he's the one creating the turnover and left behind the play. But when he does jump up as well, he's just as aggressive as the Montreal Canadiens' most dangerous forwards are, like Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki as a puck carrier. And he commands that same level of respect, often though attacking forwards and putting them in uncomfortable positions. It's been a fantastic season for Hutson. But this past week, in terms of that win streak, those 4 victories against the Carolina Hurricanes, the San Jose Sharks, and then twice against the Buffalo Sabres, Hutson was integral. On the good games, well, the best game was definitely against Carolina in a 4-0 home victory, in which Lane Hutson played 19 minutes, which has been less than his average this season, which has been about 22 and a half. He was so solid. He was incredibly good in that game. He scored a goal as well, but the goal was not even his biggest contribution. That came at even strength, and the rush defending I thought was spectacular for him in that performance. But the other games were a bit more jittery for the Montreal Canadiens, though they did win against the Sharks and twice against the Sabres. The first game against the Sabres was probably the most convincing, and there's a lot of chippiness in there as well, a lot of physicality, and Lane Hutson registered 2 assists in that game, just as he did the following game against the Buffalo Sabres again, which was definitely a shakier performance for the Habs after a 3-0 lead in the first period. It crumbled and it ended up going to overtime at a 3-3 scoreline in which Mike Matheson finished things off for the Habs. So they still secured the 2 points, but there was definitely a collapse there in regulation. But Lane Hutson was still a really, really good player in that game. And was also, again, playing 19 minutes in that performance. But he's been playing big minutes all season long. Like those two are kind of outliers for him. You see a lot of 25-minute, 23-minute games in recent weeks and months. But playing those big, reliable minutes, being a crux of the Montreal Canadiens' rush attacking schemes, as well as an integral piece of their power play that has finally become a pretty consistent offensive source this season, alongside weapons like Cole Caulfield, Patrick Laine, Nick Suzuki, and Yuri Slafkovsky now emerging as one as well on the man advantage. There's been a lot to like for the Montreal Canadiens, and Lane Hutson's been a big piece of making things kind of come together this season and putting the Habs in the mix for playoff contention. I believe their chances are lying at about 15 or 20% at the moment to crack the NHL playoffs, and the Jake Evans extension obviously is a commitment to trying to attain that, as we broke down in yesterday's episode, which will be linked above. Going back to Lane Hutson, he was fantastic this week, not just in his activations, but in the subtle moments that he uses his deception to open up small passes in the defensive zone, in the breakout, in through the neutral zone, in transition, in motion. He's constantly layering these little deceptive motions with his eyes, with his head, with his shoulder, with his feet, with his hips. Everything works in tandem to pull defenders one way and then very, very fluidly send the puck in a different direction to a teammate. And it's just been wonderful to watch this season how manipulative Lane Hutson has been as an NHL rookie already. This is a very exciting player that, I mean, I've been a massive fan of going back to his draft year campaign where I had him ranked 11th overall, and midway through that season, I just fallen in love with the way that Lane Hutson plays offensive hockey with the puck on his stick, and he's only gotten better and better and better, not just season to season since then, but month to month on a really linear level, which I have been astounded by, even as somebody that was a massive fan already heading into that 2022 NHL draft. And he's just been lighting things up for the Montreal Canadiens in my eyes. It's obviously down to him and Celebrini for the Calder. Dustin Wolf is putting up a good fight, has to be mentioned there as well. I mean, the Calgary Flames would not be in a playoff spot as they are right now in the wild card, being chased heavily by the Vancouver Canucks if it were not for Dustin Wolf, and he's been fantastic. But I think Lane Hutson being a minute-munching number 2 defenseman this season, on pace for 64 points in his rookie campaign, that has been a rarity to be hit by any rookie, forward or defenseman, in recent seasons. And to see Lane Hutson do that as an undersized 20 to 21-year-old this campaign has been really, really fun to see for myself personally. And I know Habs fans in general have been loving it. But let me know in the comments down below what you think of Lane Hutson's Calder chances. Celebrini is a fantastic player in terms of two-way refinement. I think he's perhaps a bit more polished even than Lane Hutson, but Lane Hutson's overall impact and the role that he's played in pulling the Montreal Canadiens to being in the mix this season, I think should really be in consideration. And he's also been the player playing the second most minutes this campaign for the Habs as a rookie. There's been so much to be impressed by in his game, and he's been growing his game as the season has unfolded as well. His response to adversity and reactions to poor performances has also left me impressed this campaign. So Lane Hutson has all the makings of a number one defenseman in my eyes. Long term, I think he's going to probably become that as soon as next season already for the Montreal Canadiens. And adding in a piece like Ivan Demidov is only going to spark his production even more on the power play. Adding a guy like Demidov in with the rest of those elite talents in Montreal is going to be salivating stuff on the man advantage. And that's been a power play unit that has certainly gained a level of chemistry this season that I have not seen on a Habs power play since Andrei Markov's years, probably. It's been a long time since there's been this kind of cohesiveness and cohesion and understanding of one another's positioning and that fluidity in interchanges and rotations in the offensive zone on the power play. And Lane Hutson's been such a big piece of that, because if he finds himself in a rotation at it as a bumper position, he's more than competent as a dangerous threat in that area of the ice. And that's unlocked a lot of different things for the Habs on the power play. So the impact that he's had on the Habs season, on the way they play hockey every single night, I think makes him the Calder favorite this season. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. But that wraps up this first segment on Lane Hutson. In the next segment, we're going to be delving into Zayne Parekh's game. So Calgary Flames fans, you can tune up for this one. And in the final one, of course, we'll be talking about Melvin Fernström and Ben Kindel of the 2025 NHL Draft. But before we get into all of that, a quick message from our sponsors. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every single moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Alrighty, let's keep this episode rolling here in the second segment, starting with Zayne Parekh of the Saginaw Spirit and the Calgary Flames' 9th overall selection of the 2024 NHL draft class. He's a 6 foot, 185-pound right shot defenseman at 19 years of age. He is one of the most dynamic threats in the entire CHL. And he's a blue liner. He's up to 30 goals and 96 points in 55 games, matching his point total from last season in 11 fewer games, and also racking up 89 penalty minutes this season. He may not be the biggest guy on the ice, but he certainly plays with a little bit of a violent streak. There's some grit to his game. He's been getting physically involved, certainly more this season, and never backs down from a fight. And to have that kind of fire in a game, in a player's game, when what makes him special is elite level mobility, like elite, like significantly better projection than Lane Hutson's mobility in my personal valuation. And alongside of that, dynamic playmaking, a wicked shot, and extremely refined shooting habits that support the goal scoring ability, constantly shooting for tips, for rebounds, very proactive shooter from the blue line who also likes to advance into the upper or mid slot to get his shots off. He's a really dangerous goal scorer. And I mean, he's the first ever OHL defenseman to score 30 goals in consecutive seasons. Nobody has ever done that before. And the goal that he scored to set that record came from behind the goal line after he picked up a rebound in the low slot, like right outside the crease. He plays like a forward in the offensive zone. That was right off of a zone entry. He's constantly forechecking, jumping in. He's a very, very like modern defenseman in terms of playing that fourth attacker role, jumping into forward positions, those rotations with his wingers or center in the offensive zone. He's constantly moving up and finding those seams, those gaps, those lanes to create from. And this season, combining with talent like Michael Misa, who leads the CHL in scoring, as over a goal a game, is well over 100 points now. He's over 115 points at this stage, I believe. And alongside of that, now, like mid-season reinforcements, Igor Chernyshov has arrived and is scoring at 2.5 points a game ever since coming back, like showing off that he's the most dominant power forward in the entire OHL upon arrival. There's been a lot to like for the Saginaw Spirit. There's been so many positive storylines. Christian Epperson has been fantastic alongside of Michael Misa this season as well. That Zayne Parekh has been able to just fully explore his offensive game. There's been so much exploration, discovery, and testing things out in what he's been trying this season. Not everything has worked. This hasn't been the most efficient of seasons for Zayne Parekh, but I definitely think it's a positive one for his development of him really exploring those boundaries of what he can do and how he can impact games. He's not going to be playing this level of chaos hockey in the NHL, but he's also shown that he can leverage his physicality that's growing with his elite level mobility to be a plus level piece in while defending the rush. He's also able to catch back up to play when it gets past him. That's a benefit of that mobility certainly as well. And when you pair that with that defensive aggression that's really blossoming this season, I see a player that has some upside as a defender in the NHL. He's not going to be a high-end defensive piece, but I think he's going to be able to hold his own alongside a guy that can insulate him a little bit more. I think that's a player that the Calgary Flames might still need to acquire, whether it's through the draft or through trade or free agency or whatever. I think that the future pairing mate of Zayne Parekh is yet to be in the organization because he's going to need a perhaps bit bigger guy that can clear the net front with a bit more ease. Zayne Parekh can do it, but it takes a lot out of him. I think that this is a player with significant upside. And as David St. Louis, the lead scout over at Elite Prospects, wrote in a recent scouting report, Zayne Parekh could have a similar impact in his rookie campaign to Lane Hutson. The way he thinks offensive hockey, the way he moves, the way his feet and hands and creativity just work together. He's one of the smartest defensemen outside the NHL today. There's, I think, a lot to like and a lot to be excited about in terms of first power play upside on arrival for Zayne Parekh, especially if the Flames end up dealing Rasmus Andersson at some point. That would totally open up the door for Zayne Parekh to play big minutes and Lane Hutson-like minutes of hovering around those 22, 23 minutes a night as a rookie. Perhaps not the Brock Faber 25-minute average that we saw last season, which I really don't think many rookies should try to attain. But still, I think that Parekh could be a massive impact piece next season for the Calgary Flames, and I don't think he would benefit from another year in the OHL. He's exploring the boundaries this year. He has 24 points in his last 10 games. Just this week, 13 points in 5 games, including 2 4-point performances against the Sudbury Wolves and the North Bay Battalion, both away. It's been fantastic. He's been dynamic as anything and constantly creating. So if you're a Calgary Flames fan, please let me know in the comments how excited you are about this player, what your hopes are for him next season, and who you think would be the best pairing mate currently in the organization for his style of play. But that wraps up this second segment. In the final one, we'll be wrapping up the show with Melvin Fernström of the Pittsburgh Penguins, as well as Benjamin Kindel, 2025 draft eligible, who's scoring at a ridiculous pace. He's at 95 points in the WHL. He's going to hit 100 this season already as an 18-year-old, which we don't see happen all that often, all that many times every single season. So lots to look forward to in the final segment. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. All righty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, kicking it off with Ben Kindel of the Calgary Hitmen, who has been combining so wonderfully with Oliver Tulk this season. The two right shot forwards, Kindel's been playing at right wing. He's 5'10", 176 pounds, and he's combined incredibly well with Tulk, who are both tied with 94 points for 5th in WHL scoring. Kindel has 33 goals, 61 assists in 57 games this campaign, and the playmaking has been really what's been setting him apart at the WHL level. He's incredibly cerebral. He's a really connective kind of playmaker who combines well, is able to elevate teammates and get them into scoring positions, and he also finds little gaps, and his off-puck movement is one of the best in the WHL already as well. So as a 17-year-old, he's only turning 18 on April 19th. It's been a very impressive campaign. Even against top competition, he's been showing his ability to get pucks off the wall into the middle of the ice. That physical component of the game, withstanding pressure along the boards, has really been improving over the course of this campaign. And while he's not the most dynamic individual player, the puck skills are really, really good. Though he's just not a kind of guy that's going to like dissect entire defensive structures or be a player to like take over entire shifts. He's a bit more of a connective style of guy that's going to use his teammates and connect with them rather than trying to go for the solo rush attempts. But still, he's been able to show flashes of really high-end skill, really good handling ability. Again, the playmaking is a standout. On our elite prospects grading tool that goes on a 1 to 9 scale, where 5 is an NHL average, he is a 6.5 by my evaluation. Really quite standout playmaking that could be a separating tool for him at the NHL level, that gets him minutes, that is able to entrench him a particular role as a specialist. It's good enough for that in a top 6 capacity. There's a lot to like with this player, and last week he really showed that off in a 7-0 trudging of the Kelowna Rockets on Sunday, where he scored 4 assists. None of them were overly flashy. Like, some of those were secondary, but all of them came from just really intelligent off-puck movement, moving himself into supportive positions off-puck, getting the puck and just moving it to a teammate in an even better, more dangerous position, and the puck ending up in the goal a couple moves after that. He's just constantly putting the puck in better places than where he gets it in the WHL, and doing so at a pretty impressive pace as well. The defensive game, I think, still needs a decent amount of work, but he's been pulling so much of the offensive weight this season in Calgary. Him and Oliver Talk are 42 points clear, I believe, of a third in team scoring. It's really just been a two-person machine this season. Been changing a little bit now with Tanner Howe's arrival, but before then it was really only those two players contributing consistently to the offense, and that has left a lot of room for his team to insulate him defensively. So he has a lot of offensive liberties, but still the defensive engagement is something that we've seen at points, but a consistency I would like to see improve in the coming seasons. And definitely a player I think who still needs another 2 or so seasons to develop before having a chance at making a team out of camp, but still a player with significant upside who has been rising up boards these past months, and a guy that wasn't even really on the first round radar if you look back 6 months from here. So definitely a potential late riser who goes even higher than this here. I mean, I could see him going in the Tarik Parekh range of 17th overall that we saw last season. The scoring rate is, I mean, definitely more leaning towards assists than goals, as it was with Parekh, but still, in terms of production per game, very comparable. I could see a team taking a swing on this player in the middle of the first round. But to wrap up today's episode, let's finish things off with Melvin Fernström, who was acquired by the Pittsburgh Penguins in that Marcus Pettersson trade. Perhaps a lesser talked about asset because he was also moved alongside of a first round draft selection that was just acquired before then from the New York Rangers in the JT Miller deal, but a player who has scored 6 goals and 9 points in his last 10 games. In his last 9 SHL games, he has 5 goals and 9 points at exactly a point per game. And beyond that, he's been actually playing more third line minutes and even getting looks inside the top 6 at a couple points now with Urebro in the SHL. He's a 6'2", 190-pound right shot goal scoring winger who's been showing a little bit more intensity this season. Definitely the motor is something that needs work alongside of the skating. Those are two assets that need to refine before he can make a leap to the National Hockey League level, but the off-puck instincts are excellent. The goal scoring, the finishing is really, really good. And he's been starting to flash that more consistently against pro competition this season in the Swedish Hockey League. So been a lot to like now over the recent stretch, especially when you consider that he only had 8 points in 35 games before the trade, and now he has 9 points in 10 games since it. So definitely a positive trend and a fire that's lit under this player since that deal was made. And I think the Pittsburgh Penguins could use just about any prospect help they can get at the moment. So seeing Melvin Fernström flourishing in a really good league this season is something to look forward to, because the actual performances on the ice have not been much to write home about as of late, and it looks like the Penguins are going to be very much a lottery team this season. But Melvin Fernström could be a potential bottom six goal scoring winger in about 2-3 years time. He needs some time again to develop that motor, that skating, the stamina, the lower body explosiveness need work. But when he fills out his lower body a bit more and gains those habits and gets comfortable playing just consistently in the top six at the pro level, I think that there's an NHL piece potentially here. And this is a player that I was very skeptical about last season in his draft year, because that lack of motor, the lack of intensity, the goal scoring that's good, but is mainly leveraged on those really good off-puck routes and habits. That, again, is that a separating tool at the next level? I didn't know. But he's been making it work better than I was expecting for sure this season. I wasn't expecting him to be anything near a top 9 SHL player this year already, and he's been more than treading water in that role, especially as of late. So Pittsburgh Penguins fans, here is some kind of shred of good news for you, as Melvin Fernström is playing some very good hockey and also starting to address some of his key weaknesses in his game, and could be a guy in your lineup in a couple years' time. But that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please do let me know in the comments down below what you thought about the episode. Who are your top prospect performers of last week? And what are you expecting for the prospects now as we're heading towards the trade deadline? Who's going to get moved? Lots of interesting questions coming up in the next couple days. But if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the podcast. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself a contending and sustainable roster for your fantasy league. But that wraps things up here for us today. I'm your host, Sebastian High. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you tune back in very, very soon.